Forget what you think you know about ancient economies. The Roman Empire's financial prowess was far more advanced than many modern nations today. We're cracking open their vault to reveal the intricate networks of trade, taxation, and innovation that made them the undisputed economic superpower of their time. Prepare to have your understanding of history completely reshaped. To understand the Roman Empire is to understand its immense and intricate economy. This system wasn't built on a single foundation. Instead, it rested on three massive, interconnected pillars that powered its unprecedented growth and sustained its vast territories for centuries. To truly grasp how Rome functioned, we must explore its engine: a sprawling network of trade, a structured system of taxes, and a relentless policy of conquest. These three pillars weren't independent. They formed a self-reinforcing cycle that fueled Rome's expansion, financed its legions, fed its people, and ultimately contained the seeds of its greatest challenges. Trade was the circulatory system of the Roman Empire, moving essential goods, raw materials, and luxury items across thousands of miles. And while we always picture those famous stone-paved roads, they were primarily built for the rapid movement of legions, not for commerce. The real highways of the Roman world were the seas. Shipping by sea was vastly cheaper, making a seaport essential for any major commercial hub. This maritime network connected the heart of the empire in Italy with its farthest-flung provinces, creating one massive integrated market. So, what was on Rome's shopping list? The city was both a producer and an insatiable consumer. Its economic life depended on a constant flow of imports to feed its massive population and supply its industries. The most critical import was grain, sourced primarily from Egypt, the empire's breadbasket. Without it, the city of Rome would starve. Metals like copper from Spain and tin from Britain were crucial for manufacturing, while luxury goods like silk from China, furs from the Baltic, and papyrus from Egypt satisfied the desires of the elite. But Rome wasn't just buying. Its own finished goods were in high demand. High-quality Italian bronze cooking equipment and that iconic red pottery were popular across the Mediterranean, with some pieces even turning up in Britain and India. And since most grain was imported, Italian farmers could specialize in high-value products like wine and olive oil, which were shipped across the empire in those famous clay jars called amphorae. At the very heart of Rome's import economy was the annona, the government's official distribution of grain to the Roman people. This wasn't just a simple handout. It was a massive logistical operation overseen by a high-ranking official. The annona served a critical dual role. First, it was a practical necessity. It was the only way to feed the hundreds of thousands of people packed into the city of Rome, ensuring social stability and preventing famine. The prefect's office managed everything, from signing contracts with suppliers in Egypt to overseeing the ports where the grain arrived. Second, it was a powerful political tool. Emperors like Hadrian understood that by ensuring the people were fed, they projected an image of generosity and competence. This generosity was a calculated move to secure public loyalty and consolidate their own power. Of course, funding a massive operation like the annona, not to mention the military, required a constant and reliable source of revenue. This brings us directly to the empire's second economic pillar: taxation. To pay for its massive army, sprawling public works, and extensive government programs, Rome needed a constant flow of cash. It generated this income through a complex system of taxation that was applied throughout its provinces. But how those taxes were collected changed dramatically over time. During the Roman Republic, the system was a recipe for corruption. The government used private contractors called publicani. These tax farmers would bid for the right to collect taxes in a province. They'd pay the government a lump sum up front and were then free to collect as much as they could from the locals, keeping the excess as pure profit. This practice, known as tax farming, essentially turned tax collection into a form of legalized extortion. The core problem was a massive conflict of interest. The Senate was supposed to oversee the tax farmers, But the senators themselves were often the primary investors in these tax-farming companies. The regulators were financially compromised by the very system they were meant to control. When the Emperor Augustus came to power, he knew this had to change. He replaced the publicani with salaried imperial officials. These administrators collected a more predictable tax, a flat poll tax and a wealth tax of about 1% on assets like land, all assessed through regular census lists. While still a burden, this new system was more standardized and far less prone to the extreme fraud and abuse of the old way. It brought a steady, predictable revenue stream directly to the imperial treasury. Taxes were also a sophisticated tool for shaping society. Augustus needed a reliable way to pay his veteran soldiers their retirement funds. So, in 6 CE, he created a new 5% inheritance tax, with the revenue specifically earmarked for the military treasury. This was a masterstroke of political engineering. The tax deliberately excluded inheritances left to close relatives, which meant it targeted the wealth exchanged in traditional patron-client relationships among the Roman elite. By disrupting these networks, Augustus weakened the power of other influential families and centered power around himself as the ultimate patron of the Roman world. The immense cost of maintaining this professional army, funded by these clever taxes, was directly linked to the activity that supplied the empire with its greatest sources of wealth in the first place: military conquest. Conquest wasn't just a political policy for Rome. It was a fundamental part of its economic model. For centuries, warfare was the primary method for acquiring wealth, resources, and labor on a massive scale, fueling the entire imperial system. Roman conquest brought 3 huge economic benefits that were systematically exploited. First was the acquisition of resources. Conquering new territories gave Rome direct control over vital natural resources. The conquests of Egypt, Sicily, and Sardinia, for example, vastly expanded the empire's grain supply, securing food for both the city and its armies. Second was the influx of pure wealth. Conquered territories were systematically plundered for their gold, silver, and other valuables. This loot filled the Roman treasury, funded public works, and, most importantly, paid for the military campaign itself. Third, and perhaps most significantly, was human capital through slavery. Hundreds of thousands of prisoners of war were captured and sold in Roman slave markets. The labor of enslaved people became the backbone of Roman industry, permeating every level of the economy. While many unskilled workers toiled under brutal conditions in farms and mines, slavery wasn't a monolith. Highly educated individuals, particularly from Greece, were enslaved to serve as teachers, accountants, and physicians, providing much of the empire's intellectual and administrative capital. But this economic model came with a huge trade-off. As the empire's frontiers expanded, the cost of defending them grew exponentially. Conquest, the very activity that built the empire's wealth, had become a voracious engine that now threatened to consume the treasury. The Romans were trapped in a cycle where the solution to their financial problems, more conquest, was also the source of their ever-increasing costs. These 3 pillars, trade, taxes, and conquest, formed a powerful, interconnected cycle that defined the Roman economy. It worked like this. Conquest provided new land, valuable resources, and a massive supply of enslaved labor. This new production fueled trade across the empire and dramatically expanded the base for taxes. The tax revenue, in turn, funded the legions needed for more conquest. For centuries, this engine powered Rome's dominance. But by the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, the engine began to stall. Roman expansion slowed dramatically as the empire reached its practical limits. The economic consequences were severe. The flow of plunder from new conquests dried up. The massive army still needed to be paid, but now the funds had to come from the central treasury rather than the spoils of war. This created a critical financial crisis. To solve this, emperors resorted to debasing the currency, a decision with catastrophic consequences. This meant they drastically reduced the amount of precious metal, like silver, in their coins, while legally forcing them to be accepted at their old face value. This allowed the government to mint many more coins from the same amount of silver to pay its soldiers. The decline was staggering. The primary silver coin, the denarius, was nearly pure silver in the early empire. By the mid-3rd century, during the time of Gallienus, it was only about 5% silver. And by 265 CE, it contained just 0.5% silver. This triggered hyperinflation that saw prices soar by 1,000% across the empire. The economic result was a disaster. Savings were wiped out, trade was paralyzed and often reverted to inefficient barter, and it was a major factor in the profound crisis that gripped the empire. The Roman economy was built upon the three powerful pillars of trade, taxes, and conquest. This dynamic system enabled Rome to unify the Mediterranean, build lasting infrastructure, and create a vast, integrated economic zone. However, its fundamental reliance on continuous military expansion for its wealth, resources, and labor proved to be an unsustainable model. When the conquest stopped, the economic engine stalled, leading to financial crises that crippled the empire. The story of Rome's economy offers a timeless and powerful lesson on the limits of any system built on constant growth. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this fascinating, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you do not miss our next dive into history. See you in the next video. The visuals within this presentation are crafted to enrich your understanding, serving as artistic interpretations and contextual aids rather than direct factual representations. Their purpose is to illuminate the narrative and deepen your engagement with the historical backdrop. Join our growing community of history enthusiasts. Hit the subscribe button, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support keeps history alive.